What if everything you were taught about the Grand Canyon was a carefully constructed story designed to hide one of the largest industrial operations in human history? What if those perfectly uniform layers carved into the canyon walls weren't created by millions of years of water erosion, but by thousands of workers systematically extracting valuable materials over centuries? What if the Grand Canyon isn't a natural wonder at all, but the world's largest open pit quarry, and the evidence has been hiding in plain sight the entire time? Stand at the rim of the Grand Canyon and look down. You'll see something that's been bothering geologists, engineers, and observant visitors for over a century. The walls don't slope gradually like you'd expect from water erosion. They're stepped, precise, uniform steps descending into the earth like a massive staircase built by giants. Each layer is distinct, each ledge is horizontal, and the pattern repeats with mechanical consistency for thousands of feet of vertical depth. Water doesn't cut steps. Water cuts curves, slopes, V-shaped valleys, and irregular patterns following the path of least resistance. What you see at the Grand Canyon looks nothing like water erosion. It looks exactly like a quarry. So if you're ready to question one of the foundational stories of American natural history and explore evidence that suggests a completely different origin for the Grand Canyon, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Get comfortable, because over the next half hour we're going to examine the physical evidence, the economic incentives, and the historical anomalies that point toward one of the most significant cover-ups in geological science. Let's start with the official story, the one taught in every textbook and presented at every visitor center. The Grand Canyon was carved by the Colorado River over the past 5 to 6 million years. Water flowing consistently through the same channel gradually eroded layers of sedimentary rock, cutting deeper and deeper until it created the mile-deep gorge we see today. The different colored layers represent different geological periods, from the 2 billion-year-old Vishnu schist at the bottom to the 270 million-year-old Kaibab limestone at the top. It's a monument to deep time, to the slow but relentless power of erosion, to natural processes operating over unimaginable spans. This story has problems. Big problems. Start with the most obvious one, the stepped formations. When water erodes rock, it doesn't create horizontal ledges. It creates slopes. Look at any river canyon anywhere in the world. The walls slope inward, sometimes steeply, sometimes gradually. But they slope. They don't form terraces. The Grand Canyon has distinct horizontal terraces at multiple levels, each one representing a different rock layer. These terraces are so uniform and so extensive that you can identify specific layers and track them for dozens of miles along the canyon. That's not how erosion works, that's how excavation works. Geologists explain these terraces by pointing to differential erosion. Different rock types erode at different rates, they say. Harder layers like limestone and sandstone resist erosion and form cliffs. Softer layers like shale erode faster and form slopes. Over millions of years, this creates the stepped profile. It's a reasonable explanation until you actually examine the formations up close. The ledges aren't just erosion-resistant layers sticking out. They're flat, horizontal, uniform in width. They extend for extraordinary distances with minimal variation, and most tellingly, they show evidence of tool marks. Wait, tool marks? In a natural formation? This is where it gets interesting. Multiple researchers over the past century have documented what appear to be deliberate cut marks on Grand Canyon rock faces. Straight lines scored into sandstone, right angle corners where horizontal surfaces meet vertical walls, drill holes arranged in patterns that suggest systematic extraction. These aren't random scratches from rocks tumbling in floodwater. They're geometric, repetitive, and they match patterns seen in historic quarrying operations around the world. The standard response is that these marks are either natural jointing patterns in the rock or modern damage from trail construction and maintenance. Except the marks appear in locations that have never had trail work. They appear on faces hundreds of feet below the rim, inaccessible without climbing equipment. They appear in patterns too regular to be natural jointing. And when geologists are pressed on this, they tend to dismiss the observations rather than investigate them, which raises questions about why there's such resistance to examining alternative explanations. Let's talk about the economics of quarrying the Grand Canyon. What would be valuable enough to justify an operation of this scale? The canyon exposes multiple layers of high-quality limestone, sandstone, and other sedimentary rocks. Limestone has been one of the most valuable building materials in human history. The ancient Egyptians built the pyramids from limestone. The Romans constructed entire cities with it. Medieval cathedrals across Europe were built from quarried limestone. It's been the foundation of architecture and construction for millennia. The Grand Canyon contains some of the highest quality limestone deposits in North America. The Kaibab limestone formation at the rim is particularly valuable, a dense cream-colored stone that's relatively easy to work and extraordinarily durable. The Redwall limestone, despite its red-stained exterior, is a massive formation of pure limestone that extends throughout the canyon. Then there's the Muav limestone, the Tapete sandstone, layers upon layers of building material exposed and accessible in a single location. If you were going to quarry limestone on an industrial scale, you'd want a site with these characteristics. Massive deposits of high-quality stone, multiple layers at different levels allowing simultaneous extraction from different zones, natural river access for transportation, isolation from population centers to avoid scrutiny. The Grand Canyon checks every box. It's the perfect quarry site. The only thing missing is evidence of who did the quarrying and when. Here's where the revisionist economic history becomes crucial. Mainstream archaeology and geology place the Grand Canyon's formation millions of years in the past, long before humans existed. But what if the time frame is wrong? What if civilizations existed in North America far earlier than currently acknowledged, civilizations with advanced engineering capabilities and economic systems sophisticated enough to undertake massive resource extraction projects? The evidence for pre-Columbian advanced civilizations in North America is stronger than mainstream archaeology admits. The Poverty Point culture in Louisiana built massive earthworks around 3,400 years ago that required organized labor, complex planning, and sophisticated understanding of geometry and astronomy. The Hopewell culture constructed earthen pyramids and geometric enclosures across the Midwest. The ancestral Puebloans built multi-story stone structures in the Southwest, including sites like Chaco Canyon that demonstrate advanced architectural knowledge. These weren't primitive hunter-gatherers. These were complex societies with specialized labor, trade networks, and technological capabilities. Now consider the economic incentives. If a civilization had the engineering knowledge to quarry stone, they'd need markets for that stone. Where would you sell limestone in pre-Columbian North America? You'd sell it to the builders of those massive earthworks, those pyramids, those geometric enclosures. The scale of construction across the ancient Americas was enormous. Teotihuacan in Mexico covered 8 square miles. Cahokia near modern St. Louis had a population potentially exceeding 10,000. These cities required building materials on an industrial scale. Where did they get it? The standard answer is that they sourced materials locally, but this doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Many major archaeological sites show evidence of materials transported from distant sources. The bluestones at Stonehenge came from Wales, over 150 miles away. The Moai statues on Easter Island were carved from volcanic rock and transported miles across the island. Ancient trade networks moved materials over vast distances because centralized quarrying operations were more efficient than small-scale, local extraction. If you accept that advanced civilizations existed in North America earlier than currently acknowledged, and that these civilizations engaged in large-scale construction requiring massive amounts of building material, then you need a source for that material. The Grand Canyon becomes the obvious candidate. It's centrally located relative to major archaeological sites throughout the Southwest and into Mexico. The Colorado River provides natural transportation routes. The geology provides easily accessible, high-quality stone in enormous quantities. From an economic perspective, quarrying the Grand Canyon makes perfect sense. But here's the thing about quarrying on this scale. You can't hide it. The evidence remains in the landscape for thousands of years. So why isn't this accepted history? Why does mainstream geology insist on the erosion narrative, despite evidence that doesn't fully support it? The answer might lie in who benefits from the current story and what they stand to lose if it changes. The Grand Canyon generates over $600 million annually in tourism revenue. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. The entire economy of northern Arizona depends on the Grand Canyon being a pristine natural formation carved by time and water. If it's actually a quarry, even an ancient one, that status changes. It's no longer a natural wonder, it's an archaeological and industrial site, which brings different regulations, different preservation requirements, and potentially different economic implications. There's also the matter of Native American land claims. If the Grand Canyon is an ancient quarry, that implies organized industrial activity by civilizations that preceded current Native American tribes in the region. This complicates sovereignty claims and cultural heritage arguments. Multiple tribes claim ancestral connections to the Grand Canyon. If evidence emerged that other civilizations conducted major industrial operations there, it would complicate these claims legally and politically. There are strong incentives to maintain the natural formation narrative, regardless of contradictory evidence. Let's examine specific features of the canyon that support the quarry hypothesis. The terraces are the most obvious, but there are others. The canyon's width is remarkably consistent along much of its length, typically about 10 to 15 miles from rim to rim. Natural erosion rarely produces such uniformity. Rivers meander, widen in some areas, narrow in others. The Grand Canyon maintains almost industrial regularity for over 270 miles. That consistency suggests deliberate excavation following a plan rather than natural processes following random variation. Then there's the matter of the missing material. The Grand Canyon represents approximately 1,000 cubic miles of missing rock. Where did it go? The erosion theory says it was carried away by the Colorado River and deposited downstream, except the volumes don't match. The amount of sediment deposited in the Gulf of California and surrounding areas is nowhere near sufficient to account for the material missing from the canyon. Geologists explain this by suggesting much of the sediment was deposited in areas now subducted under tectonic plates or buried under other formations. But this requires assumptions that can't be verified. The quarry hypothesis offers a simpler explanation. The material wasn't washed away. It was quarried and transported for use in construction projects across the region. You wouldn't expect to find it deposited naturally anywhere because it was moved deliberately to specific locations for specific purposes. The missing sediment isn't a geological mystery. It's building materials that were used up long ago in structures that have since collapsed or been buried. Consider the stepped profile from an engineering perspective. If you were quarrying a deep vertical excavation, you'd need steps for several reasons. First, for access. Workers and equipment need to move between levels. Second, for stability. Vertical walls are prone to collapse. My stepped excavations are more stable because each level supports the one above it. Third, for efficiency. You can work multiple levels simultaneously, extracting material from different depths at the same time. The Grand Canyon's profile is exactly what you'd design if you were planning a massive multi-level quarrying operation. The individual layers also show characteristics consistent with selective extraction. Geologists note that certain formations are missing from the canyon's stratigraphic column, layers that should be present based on regional geology but aren't found in the Grand Canyon. The standard explanation is that these layers eroded away before subsequent layers were deposited, a phenomenon called an unconformity. But the boundaries between layers are often too clean, too precise to represent natural erosion. They look more like surfaces where material was systematically removed to a specific depth before work moved to the next layer. Let's talk about the Colorado River itself. The river supposedly carved the canyon, but it doesn't behave like a canyon-carving river. Its flow rate is relatively modest. The gradient is gentle. The river meanders through the canyon rather than cutting straight through, which is odd if it's the primary erosive force. More puzzling, the river appears to flow uphill in certain sections, cutting through higher elevation plateaus rather than finding paths around them. Rivers don't naturally carve through mountains when lower routes are available. They take the path of least resistance. The Colorado River's path through the Grand Canyon doesn't follow least resistance. It follows something else. The quarry hypothesis offers an explanation. If the canyon was excavated, the river didn't carve the path was cut, and the river simply flows through it. The meandering pattern could reflect different excavation phases or different work crews operating in different sections. The apparent uphill sections make sense if excavators were following valuable mineral deposits rather than topography. You dig where the good material is, not where it's easiest to dig. There's also the question of the canyon's age. Official estimates place its formation at 5 to 6 million years old, based on dating of rock layers and modelling of erosion rates. But these estimates have problems. The rock layers can be billions of years old, while the canyon itself is much younger. You're dating when the rocks formed, not when they were exposed. Erosion rate calculations require assumptions about past water flow, climate conditions, and rock hardness that introduce enormous uncertainties. Small changes in assumptions can shift age estimates by millions of years. More recent research has suggested the canyon might be much younger than previously thought, perhaps only a few 100,000 years old or even younger in some sections. This brings the time frame closer to the range of human civilization, especially if you accept evidence of advanced cultures existing earlier than mainstream archaeology acknowledges. 100,000 years is still ancient, but it's within the range of anatomically modern humans, and potentially within the range of technologically sophisticated societies. Archaeological evidence from the Grand Canyon area itself is surprisingly sparse and oddly controlled. Access to many areas is restricted. Research permits are difficult to obtain. When archaeological sites are found, they're often quickly covered over, or access is limited to a small number of approved researchers. The official explanation is preservation and protection of sensitive sites. The effect is to limit independent investigation and control the narrative about what's actually found in and around the canyon. There have been reports over the years of unusual findings in the Grand Canyon. In 1909, the Arizona Gazette published a story about explorers finding Egyptian artifacts in a cave deep within the canyon, including hieroglyphics, copper tools, and mummified remains. The Smithsonian Institution allegedly investigated and then denied the entire thing. The cave location described in the article has never been officially verified. Skeptics dismiss the story as a hoax. Believers see it as evidence of cover-up. Whether true or not, it reflects the kinds of questions that arise when you have a massive, partially explored formation with restricted access and controlled information. From an economic history perspective, the Quarry hypothesis makes sense in ways the erosion story doesn't. Ancient civilizations needed building materials. The Grand Canyon contains some of the best building materials in North America in staggering quantities. The transportation network exists via the Colorado River. The technical capability to quarry stone on large scales has been demonstrated at sites around the world from similar time periods. The economic incentive exists. The physical capability exists. The opportunity exists. What's missing is the willingness to seriously investigate the possibility because it contradicts established narratives that serve current economic and political interests. Think about what acceptance of the Quarry hypothesis would mean. Every geology textbook would need revision. The Grand Canyon's status as a natural wonder would be questioned. Tourism marketing would need to change. Land use regulations would shift. Native American cultural claims would be complicated. University geology departments would need to explain why they missed or ignored evidence for over a century. The National Park Service would need to reconsider its entire management approach. There are enormous institutional barriers to accepting a revision this fundamental regardless of the evidence. But the evidence keeps accumulating. The stepped formations that don't match erosion patterns, the tool marks that don't match natural processes, the missing material that was never found downstream, the river that doesn't follow the path of least resistance, the consistent width that doesn't match natural variation, the restricted access that prevents independent investigation, the pattern of dismissing rather than investigating alternative explanations, the economic incentives that align with organized industrial extraction, the archaeological evidence of advanced civilizations in North America earlier than acknowledged. Each piece alone might be explained away. Together they form a pattern that's harder to ignore. The Grand Canyon might be the largest example, but it's not the only formation with these characteristics. Other canyons throughout the American Southwest show similar stepped profiles, similar tool marks, similar anomalies that don't quite fit the erosion narrative. Bryce Canyon, Zion Canyon, Canyonlands all show characteristics that could be interpreted as quarrying rather than natural formation. The entire canyon system of the Colorado Plateau might represent an ancient industrial zone rather than a collection of natural wonders. What would it take to prove the quarry hypothesis definitively? unrestricted access to examine supposed tool marks with modern forensic techniques, chemical analysis of rock faces to detect residues from ancient cutting tools, systematic surveying using LiDAR and other technologies to map the formations in detail, comparison with known ancient quarry sites to identify matching techniques, archaeological excavation in areas currently restricted to search for waste material, tools, or other evidence of human activity. The technology exists to investigate these questions thoroughly. What's lacking is the institutional will to ask them. The implications extend beyond the Grand Canyon itself. If advanced civilizations quarried the canyon, it suggests a level of economic organization, technological capability, and population scale far beyond what's currently attributed to pre-Columbian North America. It suggests trade networks spanning continents, architectural traditions requiring massive stone resources, and social structures capable of organizing industrial operations over extended periods. It rewrites the economic history of the ancient Americas entirely. It also raises questions about what else might be hiding in plain sight. How many other natural formations are actually ancient industrial sites? How much of the landscape has been shaped by human activity that's been forgotten or deliberately obscured? The revisionist approach to economic history isn't about denying natural processes. It's about recognizing that human economic activity has shaped the world more extensively and for far longer than current narratives acknowledge. The Grand Canyon might be the most dramatic example, but it's potentially just the beginning of understanding how deeply human industry has altered the landscape throughout history. So the next time you stand at the rim of the Grand Canyon and look at those perfect steps descending into the earth, ask yourself what you're really seeing. Are you looking at millions of years of erosion creating an improbable pattern that just happens to match quarrying techniques? Or are you looking at evidence of the world's largest ancient industrial operation, hidden in plain sight, protected by a narrative that serves current economic and political interests more than it serves truth? Let's dig deeper into specific geological anomalies that support the quarry hypothesis. Take the Redwall limestone formation, one of the most prominent layers in the canyon. It's named for its distinctive red color, but the limestone itself isn't red. It's grey. The red color comes from iron oxide staining that washed down from overlying formations. What geologists don't adequately explain is why the staining is so uniform and perfectly applied to the vertical face of this particular layer throughout hundreds of miles of canyon. If you were quarrying limestone, you'd want to protect exposed faces from weathering. One method used in historic quarries was applying protective coatings or allowing controlled oxidation to create a harder surface layer. The Redwall's distinctive colouring could represent exactly this kind of protective treatment applied during extraction. The uniformity isn't natural weathering, it's controlled surface treatment on an industrial scale. Then there's the great unconformity, where billion-year-old metamorphic rocks meet 540-million-year-old sedimentary rocks with nothing in between. That's over 400 million years of geological time missing from the record. The contact surface between formations is remarkably flat and extensive. Natural erosion over hundreds of millions of years doesn't produce flat surfaces. It produces irregular, weathered interfaces. The great unconformity looks like someone deliberately removed everything down to a specific layer. From a quarrying perspective, this makes perfect sense. You'd excavate down to bedrock, removing all softer, less valuable material above it. The Vishnu schist at the bottom is metamorphic rock, much harder and less useful for building than sedimentary layers above it. A rational quarrying operation would remove material down to this basement layer and stop. The great unconformity might not be a geological mystery at all. It might be the flaw of the quarry. The economic calculations become compelling when you consider the scale of ancient construction throughout the Americas. The city of Teotihuacan alone contains the Pyramid of the Sun, which required approximately 1 million cubic meters of material. The Pyramid of the Moon used another 380,000 cubic meters. Multiply that across dozens of major ceremonial centers and thousands of smaller settlements, and you're talking about billions of cubic meters of building material needed over several thousand years. Where did all that material come from? Many major sites show no evidence of nearby quarrying on the scale necessary. The stone had to come from somewhere. The Romans moved granite from Egypt to Rome. The builders of Stonehenge transported bluestones over 100 miles. Materials from the Grand Canyon region could have supplied construction throughout the Southwest and into Mesoamerica. The Colorado River connects to the Gulf of California and Pacific coast, providing access to settlements throughout western Mexico. Inland routes lead directly to major sites like Chaco Canyon and Hohokam settlements. The Grand Canyon sits at the nexus of routes that could have distributed material throughout the region. The timeline objection is worth addressing. The Grand Canyon represents approximately 1,000 cubic miles of missing material. If you assume a quarrying operation lasting 10,000 years, then you'd need to extract about 400,000 cubic meters per year. That sounds impossible until you remember that the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan represents 1,000,000 cubic meters, built in perhaps a few hundred years. If one city could mobilize enough labor to move 1,000,000 cubic meters for a single structure, a civilization-scale effort could absolutely extract millions of cubic meters per year from a central quarrying operation. What economic system would support quarrying on this scale? We tend to think of pre-industrial economies as primitive, but evidence from around the world suggests otherwise. The Bronze Age tin trade connected Britain to the Mediterranean. The Silk Road operated for millennia. The Polynesians navigated the Pacific, establishing trade networks across thousands of miles of open ocean. The ancient economies were far more sophisticated and interconnected than typically acknowledged. If a continental-scale trade network existed in the Americas, moving building materials from centralized quarrying operations to construction sites would be economically rational. The cover-up aspect might seem like conspiracy thinking until you examine how geological narratives actually get established and maintained. Academic careers are built on research that advances existing frameworks. Challenging fundamental narratives is professionally risky. Add the economic stakes of the Grand Canyon status as a natural wonder. The National Park Service, tourism operators, the state of Arizona's economy all depend on it. There are billions of dollars and thousands of careers tied to the current narrative. That creates enormous resistance to alternative explanations regardless of evidence. What would happen if the quarry hypothesis were proven? The Grand Canyon would be reclassified as an archaeological and industrial heritage site. This would trigger different legal frameworks, different preservation requirements, and different research protocols. Academic institutions would need to revise not just Grand Canyon interpretations, but broader models of ancient American civilizations and their economic capabilities. The broader implications are profound. If ancient civilizations in the Americas had the capacity to conduct industrial operations on this scale, it fundamentally changes our understanding of pre-Columbian societies. It suggests population sizes far larger than currently estimated. It suggests economic systems far more complex than acknowledged. It suggests technological capabilities that rival contemporary societies elsewhere in the world. This connects to broader arguments about ancient global trade. If the Americas had sophisticated civilizations capable of mega engineering projects, they weren't isolated. There's increasing evidence of pre-Columbian contact between the Americas and other continents. The isolation narrative is breaking down. Advanced quarrying operations at the Grand Canyon would fit into this larger picture of connected ancient world systems. The stepped walls of the Grand Canyon stand as silent testimony to something, whether water over millions of years or ancient industry over thousands of years. The evidence increasingly points toward the latter. Whether mainstream science is willing to examine that evidence honestly remains to be seen.